Hello and welcome to episode 146 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. On the show today, Marissa from Chicago is back to continue our conversation about her recent trip to Disneyland. We'll focus a little more on Disney's California Adventure today, but we will be starting at Walt's original park. We also like to do a little comparison. Both of us are Walt Disney World regulars, so it's fun to look at these parks and compare where each one of them really excels. Before we get started, I just wanted to say that it may be a sign that we're growing that we got our first really bad spammer troll last week. The fact that we've been doing this for almost 3 years without having any trolls is pretty impressive in and of itself. I sincerely apologize if anyone saw the vulgar content before I could rid it from the comments section. We try to be family friendly on the show, and we really try to be inclusive of all types of people. Racist and ableist rhetoric will not be allowed in our comment sections. This podcast has developed a relatively decent following, and we will always use it for positive ends. We have promoted fundraisers for LGBTQ+ organizations. We've promoted organizations assisting with chronic illness. We've helped people raise money for Give Kids the World, food banks, and children's hospitals. Of course, earlier this year, we raised over $1,300 to buy basketballs, soccer balls, and volleyballs for Boys and Girls Club locations in Central Florida. And last year, I walked across Ireland using this platform to raise money and awareness in the fight against domestic violence. Between now and December 4th, Jeff Gordon, who's a very active member of Diz Twitter, is doing a fundraiser for Second Harvest Food Bank of Orange County, Florida. At the height of the pandemic, many Walt Disney World cast members and Universal Orlando Resort team members relied on these locations to get their daily meals. Many still rely on them. The cost of living in the Orlando area has skyrocketed, and that is partially our fault. Those of us who create the demand for more amenities in the area drive up the price of land and housing, and more people storm in to experience these parks each and every day. Let's shut up the trolls, but do it with our actions. The link to Jeff's fundraiser will be pinned to my Twitter profile through December 4th. You can find me on Twitter at Rick_ear. It will also be in the description for this podcast on YouTube. Small guys attack others on the internet, while tall guys do something to make the world a better place. Of course, being a tall guy has nothing to do with your height or gender in this situation. You are tall in stature. Now let's get things started. Thanks for being here, Marissa.
Thank you for having me.
So last week we started our conversation about your trip back in September, was it?
Yes, it was. Early September.
To Disneyland Resort. We started talking about Disneyland Park, doing a little comparison back and forth between what was going on at Disneyland and Magic Kingdom and Walt Disney World, comparing some of the rides that are in both. We haven't got to DCA yet. We're going to talk about that in this episode. But before we get there, just a couple more things I wanted to discuss in Disneyland Park. One of them was the changes to the Snow White Dark Ride and what you thought about those, because this used to be Snow White's Scary Adventure, and every once in a while it did kind of freak out some kids. But then you also have the nostalgia factor of so many people not wanting this classic ride changed. What did you think about it?
I thought it was really cute. I thought a lot of the changes were really well done. I liked it a lot. I had no complaints. I thought it was a nice little update. And if people still want some scary ride to, put their kids through or get a little spooks, they can always go, right next door, hop on Mr. Toad's and take that ride.
Absolutely, because you can end up in hell in Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, and that just doesn't happen in Snow White's Scary Adventure. Or it didn't happen in Scary Adventure, and it certainly doesn't happen in Enchanted Wish, or I forget exactly what it is called now. I did want to ask, did you do the Matterhorn?
Oh, yes.
What do you think about the
Yep.
Matterhorn? Because we complained about Walt Disney World's Space Mountain, which can kill your back. Now let's get over to the Matterhorn in Disneyland, which I think is the exact same course as Space Mountain in Walt Disney World. Like, it does the exact same things to my back.
Yeah, it was rough. Um, it was one that we did early in the day, and I wish that we had saved it for nighttime because I think it would have been really cool to ride at night. But we ended up in the very last little car. So by the time we got off of that, we were both like, well, all right, that was fun. Glad we did it. We do not need to do this one again.
Yeah, I can only ride the very front seat in that ride. I can't even fit my legs into the further back seats. And even then, it's still kind of like they have to almost delay the ride to help me get out of it because I am just too tall for it. There's a couple rides that every once in a while I am just too tall for them. And Matterhorn at Disneyland is one of them. It killed me. I know I rode it with the other co-host, Sarah Says, and we were in line together. We waited for it. And then I ended up not being able to get on behind her, and she ended up going. And then, I had to meet up with her later. Like, we were screaming, okay, just wait by Alice, So we had to deal with that. But it is a hard one sometimes. And I love the aesthetic of it. I love how it looks in Disneyland Park, but I will never ride it again.
Yeah, to be honest, I thought of you when I was getting on that ride. And I was like, all right, I am 5'3", and I'm sitting here going, I'm a little cramped back here. I'm like, how did Rick do this?
It's good to be remembered sometimes. It is such a weird experience. Yeah, I had such a hard time on it. And the other one that I can't ride over in Walt Disney World is sometimes my legs are too long for Avatar Flight of Passage, depending on what shoes I wear. If I wear Hoka's with a thick sole, then all of a sudden my legs are too long. If I wear flip-flops or sandals, I can ride it. It's bizarre. It's like the reverse of what they do to kids to try to get them to ride roller coasters. Like, I'm trying to shave off the bottoms of my shoes. So, all right, now we have to go to the big one because there are a lot of rumors about what's going to be happening with Dinoland USA and Disney's Animal Kingdom and the ride Dinosaur in particular. Everybody knows, or a lot of people know by this point, that it is basically the same ride system for Dinosaur as the Indiana Jones ride in Disneyland. But I know I'll at least say it, and we'll get your opinion in a second. The Disneyland version, this Indiana Jones ride, is next level compared to Dinosaur. Just an amazing ride. And there's some rumors that maybe we get Indiana Jones here on the East Coast. What were your thoughts on the ride, and what are your thoughts on maybe having that ride come to the East Coast?
Oh, I mean, I love the ride. Going there was one of the things I was most excited to ride. I remember riding it as a kid and loving it, but I didn't really have firm memories of actually being on it and experiencing the ride itself. So I was really looking forward to actually, refreshing those memories and getting to experience the ride kind of for the first time. And it did not disappoint. It was so much fun. It was one of those things that it's Dinosaur, but you get off and you're like, how is that the same ride as Dinosaur? Because it feels like it's so much more. It's so good. And I know, I was an Indiana Jones kid. I grew up watching the movies and absolutely obsessed with them. So there is a nostalgia bias coming in for me.
But I'm going to say something here. I have never, this is going to blow some people's minds. I have never seen an Indiana Jones movie. That has definitely blown Marissa's mind here. But what I'm going to say But what I'm going to say is you don't have to have ever seen an Indiana Jones movie because this ride is just like you understand exactly what's happening. They explain the story to you very, very well, probably even better than they do in Dinosaur, partially because the story doesn't really make sense in Dinosaur. Why are we going to get this iguanodon at the worst possible time in the history of the planet? You have a
Dr.
time
Secret.
machine, but you pick the worst possible time in the history of the planet to get this iguanodon. Anyway, it makes sense. It is beautiful. A lot of the time when you're on the ride in Dinosaur, it's just dark and you're going through pitch black. But you are always seeing something on the Indiana Jones ride. It's the exact same track. After you ride the one in Disneyland and then you ride the one in Walt Disney World, you can tell, oh, this is when we're in that gigantic room with all of those things happening. And all I'm doing is making sure my bag doesn't fall out of the vehicle right now because we're just moving for no reason in the Walt Disney World version, in the dinosaur version. But that one over at Disneyland, Indiana Jones, is one of the best rides on property. You could make a case that it is the best ride at Disneyland. And Disneyland has Big Thunder Mountain, Rise of the Resistance. Like, there are a lot of good rides at Disneyland, and that's right up with any of them. So if this comes to Disney's Animal Kingdom, while I might not be thrilled thematically, I will definitely be excited to just ride it because it's so good.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where selfishly, I would love for it to come to Animal Kingdom just because I want to be able to ride it more often. And that would afford me the ability to do that. But, thematically, that's a whole different thing. But I think it would be great. It's one of those rides that you can't help but smile the whole time you're riding it. Like you just have the biggest grin on your face and you can't even help it. It's just that fun of a ride. And like Dinosaur, on the other hand, is just kind of bewildering. Like it's probably one of the cheapest rides for Disney to run because there's no lighting. So, if they're saving tons of costs there.
And they never
But,
fix
like,
the animatronics, so
they don't have to. You can't see them anyway. If something's broken, you can't tell.
touche.
So, from that standpoint, Indiana Jones is it really is just one of the best Disney rides, bar none.
Before we cross the Esplanade and head over to Disney's California Adventure, is there anything else that you got to experience at Disneyland Park that really exceeded your expectations?
Toontown was really cool. They had just done a refurbishment of Toontown, I believe. And, Mickey Minnie's Runaway Railway is there now. And that's a really cute area. We actually went back there one day while we were waiting for a return time for a ride. And we just kind of hung out on one of the benches and, looked all around at all the art. And they really do a good job making it look like you are in a cartoon. I really enjoyed that.
All right, so now we're heading over to Disney's California Adventure. You just walk a couple 100 feet to Park Hop at Disneyland instead of having to get on a Skyliner or a monorail or drive your car or, God forbid, get on a bus. And if you are a Pearl Jam fan like myself, you find Eddie Vedder's family's brick outside of Disneyland Park before you head over to DCA, but the Vedder family is represented, and yes, that is the Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam. And then you head over to DCA. This was your first time experiencing Avengers Campus, so we have a lot to talk about there. Spider-Man web slingers, what you think about Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout compared to the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, and the character interactions We talked in the last episode about how character interactions are so different in Disneyland than they are in Walt Disney World, and the characters are really the star of the show in Avengers Campus.
Avengers Campus, to put it lightly, blew my mind. It was the coolest thing. And, it's a small area. There's, not that much to do, but we spent so much time over there, and partially it was because of the characters. It was so much fun to hang out there, and all of a sudden Thor's walking by. And you're like, "Oh my gosh, hi Thor." And he's like waving and like, has his hammer, and it's so cool. Or Doctor Strange or any of the other litany of characters who are just there walking around. We got to hang out with Loki for a little bit and just like chat. It was so fun, and you really feel like you are in this world. And, for someone who's a Marvel fan like me and is a bit of a superhero nut and also enjoys suspension of disbelief, like, you can't get much better than that. It was so much fun.
And there's a few things that I want to say here. Like, I know the Black Panther show, like, they'll have these little shows that just take place periodically. I don't know if you can find out what time the shows happen, but I like it when they kind of happen organically around you. And I was there with co-host Sarah Says. She has a young boy. She has a young son. And there was just this little boy during the Black Panther show who walked up and made the Wakanda Forever sign. And then one of the actors, dancers in the fighters, I don't know exactly what you'd call them, but one of the choreographers in the Black Panther show went and gave that Wakanda Forever sign to that kid. Sarah's next to me bawling, like she just absolutely lost it. Like, it was the coolest thing to see these interactions, and you can just meet Iron Man. Like, just Iron Man's there. There's Iron Man, say hey. Like, that is something about this land. You are right. It is tiny. It is a very small theme park land. When you're used to Galaxy's Edge and then you come over to Avengers Campus, it is minuscule. I do want to ask, like, we talked about the Indiana Jones ride. It never came up when I knew you to talk about your fandom for Indiana Jones, because this is the first time we talked about that ride. Since the Marvel stuff isn't as much in Walt Disney World as it is over in Disneyland for a variety of reasons we're not going to get into today, are you a big Marvel fan? Like, are these movies that you watch a lot? So is this something that you experienced both A, as a Marvel fan, and B, as a Disney fan?
Yeah, definitely. I love these movies. I was hooked when the first Iron Man came out, and, that was it. So I've been a big fan of these movies for a while, and, being able to step into the world or feel like you're stepping into the world as a Marvel fan was so incredibly exciting. And it was something that, my sister and I talked a lot about, and we were both so impressed. And I think we had reasonable expectations of the land going into it, but it really did blow us away. And especially for it being such a small area, they really pack it with things to do between, they have rides, they have food, they have all these different shows, all the characters. It is a lot of fun.
What do you think about Spider-Man Web Slingers?
I loved it. Maybe because, partially I'm not the best at those kind of rides, and I killed it on Web Slingers. Like, look, I I am never the winner, and I like blew everyone else in our car out of the water. So I was like, yeah, this is great.
No, between Sarah Says beating my backside on Web Slingers and Jillian beating me on Toy Story Mania every time, I'm getting sick of competitive games at Disney parks. But I did like it. How about Mission Breakout? We have discussed that you really love Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, but how do you like the version that is geared towards Guardians of the Galaxy over at DCA?
Listen, I'm gonna totally cop out and be like, oh, they're both great versions. They both have, merits of their own. Um, but specifically, I will say that I was obsessed with Mission Breakout. Truly, that was another one that I lost count of how many times we did it. And when we were there, we hit the Halloween season. So
Oh,
after
after like
after
4 o'clock at night or something, they switch it over to a different version.
yeah, so after 4 p.m. it becomes Monsters After Dark, which has its own storyline, and it's pretty incredible. I don't want to get into spoilers, but I will broad strokes it. In the regular Guardians of the Galaxy mission breakout, you go into the room, there's, a little pre-show, and some things happen. In Monsters After Dark, it's like a continuation of that story. So there are certain props that are there in a certain way because of how the original story happens. And it's just these little attentions to detail like that are so impressive. And then you get on the ride and it's this like heavy rock song and like, all the lights are out and it is just so much fun.
And we've talked about this with going over to Star Wars Galaxy's Edge with Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run. Like, this is an example of Disney using different songs, different patterns every time you ride the ride. So it's something a little different every time you do it. They need to bring that to Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run because that's a ride you just forget exists if you've done it a few times because it is so very, very repetitive. And Mission Breakout does it the right way. Let's move over now to Cars Land because I think this is one of the most impressive lands at any Disney park throughout the world. I am not a fan of the Cars movies, but I could spend so much time. Now, I did live in Arizona and I do like road trips and Route 66, so I do get some of that. But everything about this land, and when you're walking past DCA and you're outside the park, and you just think, that land is right on the other side of this, and it feels like I'm in a completely different part of the country, even though I know it's right on the other side of these trees.
It is, like, immersiveness wise, an absolute feat. You know, it is incredible. And that this was new to me as well. I'd never seen this before. And walking into Cars Land was just wild because it really does. I mean, it really does feel like you're stepping into the Cars franchise. And, seeing it at day is pretty incredible. But when you're there at night and they have like all the neon signs lit up and all that different lighting, and you walk around over by Radiator Springs Racers and that's all lit up for the evening, it is so beautiful that, I'd seen a lot of pictures. I'd seen a lot of videos. I was not going into this spoiler free. It did not do it justice. Not even close.
And then when you talk about rides that are carbon copies of the layout, but have different theming, we talk about Dinosaur versus Indiana Jones. That's nothing when you compare Test Track to Radiator Springs Racers. Radiator Springs Racers makes Test Track look like hot garbage.
It does.
So good. There's animatronics all over the place. You have a race against somebody instead of just going out there and speeding up by yourself. It's amazing. It is so much better. You go past this waterfall before you start the race. It is beautiful. You have to do it once, rope dropping it, because you want the short line, but you have to wait in line at one point at night because you have to do it at night because it's so beautiful at night. This ride is definitely an S tier attraction. This is right up there with Indiana Jones, Rise of the Resistance, all of those amazing Disney attractions.
Easily. And this is going to sound so nerdy. So, it is what it is. But
No,
getting
not
off
on
that
this
ride,
show.
oh no. Getting off that ride, I think I turned to my sister and I was like, the show building for this has to be huge. Like, that's all I could think of. Because when you're inside, I mean, not only are there animatronics, but there are full sets that you're driving through. You're in a car driving through these full sets that feel life size. It is amazing.
Your ride vehicle is a character, so these animatronics have to be to scale of your ride vehicle. So if Mater is communicating with your car, it has to be how big Mater would be compared to your car that fits, what, 6 people?
I think so.
So think about that. That is huge. These are huge animatronics, and you are inside for a long time. So you're right. That show building must be a monster.
And it's just so impressive that not only that it got built, but it got built to the level of detail that it has, and that you get a full dark ride experience, because you really do when you're inside. It is a full dark ride. And they could have just done that, and it would have been a satisfying ride. And instead, they went, pardon the pun, the extra mile, and they give you a race afterwards.
It is so good. Words can't do it justice. You're just going to have to, if you've never been to Disneyland, you're going to have to make the trip, because it is a next level attraction. Another one of those, like I said, not an IP that really excites me, but I could ride that ride over and over and over again. I could just sit in that land and drink a soda and wait for them to turn on the lights. And then I know when I was there, they flipped it over to Halloween halfway through the week. So they had the Halloween decorations throughout, and that's a whole nother vibe that they're adding. Such a great land. Just getting over to a few of the other things over at DCA. What were some of your favorites of the things that have existed for a while? Did I miss anything when trying to talk about some of these other lands?
So one of my other favorites was Incredicoaster. So much fun. It's great. More of like your classic roller coaster experience. I loved that it was outside. I thought that was such a cool aspect to it. The way it goes over the water kind of, and you have that really cool loop. Loved that. We did that several times as well, between daytime and nighttime. It was a lot of fun. And our very last ride on it, somehow, I don't know how it happened, it was completely silent. None of the audio was working, except for the one part when you go through the tunnel and Mr. Incredible goes, "Jack, Jack, num num cookie." That was it. There was no music, nothing. That was the only audio we got. And it was absolutely hysterical. So that's definitely, a memory I'll look back on and treasure for sure. Just in terms of other things we did, my sister and I came up with this idea that we should do every ride while we were there. So that meant,
That meant Goofy Sky School.
It sure did. It sure did. And, we're looking at that one and we're like, oh, it's Goofy Sky School. That's no big deal. So we grabbed a churro and walked on over. And boy, if there's a worse ride to do right after you eat a churro, I don't know what it is, because that was so jerky. It was rough. And our little car of 4 was us and 2 other adults. So all four of us, getting off that ride, were like, oh boy, that was a rough one.
And then I know we didn't get the chance to talk about this when we were talking about Disneyland. I kind of skipped past it, but it was the Halloween season, so you got to see the Nightmare Before Christmas overlay of Haunted Mansion. And I wanted to know, as a Walt Disney World regular who was heading over to Disneyland, were you a little disappointed that you didn't get to see the original version? Or were you really happy that you got to see the holiday overlay?
So I'll preface this with saying my probably controversial opinion that I don't care for Nightmare Before Christmas. I've tried to watch it several times, and I've not been able to stay awake through it the whole time, which I know sounds awful and like I hate that, but it is what it is. So originally I was very disappointed because, the original Haunted Mansion is the original Haunted Mansion, and as a bit of a parks nerd, I was like, oh man, it would have been really cool to see that, and I don't know when I'll be back to see it, all that stuff, until we got on the ride. And my opinion, I mean, complete 180. I was going through that whole ride with like my jaw dropped just in awe of how incredible it was. And again, this is coming from someone who does not care about The Nightmare Before Christmas. It was just so impressive to see the overlay and the completely different story. And then, of course, you get into the ballroom scene, and it was just absolutely incredible. And it was one that I had said, we're going to do this once to say we've done it. And we ended up having to go back to do it again.
It definitely feels like you covered your bases on this trip and did a lot of things multiple times, which, you know what? Get your money's worth, because like you said, you never know how many times you're going to be able to make it out there. And when you're there, do these things until you're almost sick of them. Marissa, thank you so much for being back on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me back and letting me talk about my trip.
If you're checking us out on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. We're trying to grow the channel into the new year, and there's a lot of exciting stuff on the horizon. I plan to have a video, vlog, or podcast episode for every day of the month of December. This will include the holiday decorations all around Walt Disney World, Universal Orlando Resort, and other locations in Florida. I'll have all of the happenings at my first Jollywood Nights at Disney's Hollywood Studios later this month. I certainly hope it calms down a little bit from the first one. There will be dining reviews, and I have found some old videos I made from traveling to places before I ever thought of putting videos up on YouTube. I think it will be a fun month on the channel, so make sure you are subscribed at Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. We will be back next Thursday, which will be Thanksgiving. I'm going to start a fun two-part conversation with my other co-host, Sarah Says, where we rank every single ride at Disneyland Resort on a tier list. I hope this leads to a little controversy, a little bit of light trash talking among fans. Until then, have a great week.